Now, last week, we did get a few complaints in the comments about Andrew using inappropriate language at a high frequency. So in response to that, he is not here this week, just so we can announce that we have a designated Andrew for assignment, and we have activated Mother Teresa from the injured list. Now, she has been out for a long time, recovering on the fact that she's dead. So no loose ends are here. Everybody wins. Episode number 39 of the Mets Weekly podcast, 60 minutes of brutal honesty, begins right now. Now, as for your usual house cleaning, make sure to subscribe to the Mets Weekly channel for content throughout the week, including premiere of this very podcast every single week. Turn on post notifications for instant live streams regarding breaking news all off season long. Follow us on Twitter, TikTok, all of our individual links that are in the description. So at this current moment, we are about 2 to 3 weeks away from pitchers and catchers reporting. We are about less than a month away from actual spring games being played, pretty much shaping up to see what the roster is going to look like, as right now it looks like not a rebuild year, doesn't look like a compete for a World Series year. It just looks like a wait and see.
We are getting closer and closer to that time period where, you know what, if you want to add pitching, I always believe you have to do it before pitchers and catchers report. I think that always trying to have a pitcher play catch up is never a good sign. I feel like a lot of times those deals don't really work out in the pitching market. So if you're going to add someone, you really are kind of up against the clock. You know, the Mets, they made a move. We'll get to it, but I hope they're not done as far as major league moves. There still is one particular move that I think is required that it doesn't look like they're going to do, but I still think they should do. But it, like you said, it's kind of a wait and see approach. Ultimately, is what it comes down to. I mean, if you are a big disappointment again, you have a lot of these one-year deals. Are they a team that trades and do they try to get the young players again? They're not going to get the caliber guys that they did with, you know, the Verlander, Scherzer, and things like that. But they're still just going to keep trying to build up that young farm system. So it's something that, you know, when you're looking at the long-term approach, something the Mets hadn't done in the previous ownership. So that is something that we'll see if, and again, that's worst case scenario, but in the ideal world, you do want to be competitive and right there in the race. I mean, that's really what you're hoping for every single year.
I have not really had my big expectations at all this offseason. I think that I've already made that pretty clear. Maybe it might feel like the Mets not really spending as much money as people thought they would after losing as much as they did last year, 75 wins. But one thing that I think that there is a huge difference here with the Mets is that even if they're not going full all in right now, they have an executive that has a plan. And that's something that they've really been missing. But obviously with Steve Cohen at the helm right now, you expect a little bit more. But right now you have a plan in place with David Stearns, which I think makes everyone a little bit more comfortable. Right now, I think that I'm just going to, let them play the course before I get any sort of angry. I think that they're just kind of playing the field right now and they're not trying to go completely all in. And if the opportunity presents itself at any point, maybe there's a possibility they bring in one of these big names that held out for most of free agency into spring trade.
I think the big difference too is all the money that's already committed to the current roster. I mean, that's why you can't just look at this offseason just by itself as far as who they added compared to who they already have. You know, the fact that you already have given out the $300 million to Francisco Lindor, you made the big extensions to Nimmo and Edwin Diaz, and like you've said plenty of times, all the money that you still are paying Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, in addition to at least you have a hope and you feel like you have a chance to re-sign Pete Alonso, where in the previous regime, you wouldn't feel too confident. Meanwhile, this time you feel like there is a very good chance that you actually can do that, in addition to all the money you've already committed. And again, it's like they also offered $300+ million to Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So if he accepts it, that's $300 million plus that the Mets spent this offseason, which again, they would have never done in a previous one if it was the original one.
They're just showing a pivot and they're showing that, the market definitely has its dents in it going after Yamamoto. And then after that, there didn't seem like anybody, and there still doesn't seem like anyone you want to give a 10-year, 12-year deal to.
And I think the fact that, not only from the Mets' sake, but the fact that these other teams still have not signed to Blake Snell or Jordan Montgomery, it shows you that the Mets are kind of, in line with what everyone else thinking, like, hey, these guys, they're just not worth their asking price. So, they weren't the team that's like, oh, we didn't get Yamamoto, let's make the panic move, because there were plenty of teams in that market, and no one has made that panic move to Snell or Montgomery.
So as for the Mets, let's get into this week's stories. Now, as for the top story, the Mets have made an addition to their bullpen this week, and it is technically a reunion. The Mets have re-signed right-handed pitcher Adam Ottavino to a one-year, $4.5 million contract after the veteran reliever declined his $7.25 million player option for 2024. After signing a two-year, $14.5 million contract with the Mets last offseason, Ottavino posted a 3.21 earned run average, a 4.52 fielding independent pitching, striking out 23.8% of batters across 61.2 innings pitched out of the Mets bullpen. But overall, Ottavino did struggle a lot last year, with 20 of his total 22 earned runs surrendered, ending up in high leverage situations, where Ottavino posted a 6.72 earned run average in 32.2 innings. Ottavino will now be entering a 38-year-old season, and while declining his player option, the Mets will be paying deferred salary from 2025 to 2031. Andy Martino reported that the Mets are still considering adding bullpen help, as they have been linked to other free agents such as Ryan Stanek, Bill Maton, and Wendy Peralta. Without even starting off this conversation, I think it's safe to say that you and me are on the same page with this.
Yes. I mean, this is a guy that I made the video about this weekend. I just didn't think it was the right move. I felt that we've seen him in a decline already from his second year compared to his first year. And like we talked about, I wasn't even a fan of them bringing him back the first time for last season, because I felt that it was a typical reliever thing where they give you the one great year. They used him a lot the first year that he was with the Mets. He had way too many outings where he's going 2 innings, and they had to do that because, first of all, he was pitching very good. I mean, don't get me wrong. He was a pleasant surprise because he did pitch so well, even when they gave him those 2 innings and things like that. But with a guy at that age, you just knew that the regression was bound to happen the following season. And like you said, I mean, he wasn't good in high leverage. Just across the board, everything was worse. And when you see a player that's clearly on a decline, and obviously with his age, I think that you should try to avoid that player. But the Mets, they decided to bring him back. And I just don't understand how that necessarily makes the Mets a better team. That's the thing that kind of worries me, is that, okay, we said, all right, we got to focus on maybe the bullpen now with this last few moves that we're going to make in the offseason. I just don't think that bringing a guy back who didn't play great for you and is most likely going to be even worse was the right decision to make. And I hope that this is not the last move, because I just don't think that you can, even for Hector Neris to get $9 million and a club option, I would rather have done that than get Adam Ottavino and bring him back in. I hope that this does not take them out of the running of a Wandy Peralta or Ryan Stanek or some of these other guys that we've talked about, because those guys are much better fits, much better pitchers. So I don't understand why they're settling for less, why they're kind of recycling these players that we've seen before, when all the signs point to him being even worse. So I think that so far this offseason, they've been trying to take this approach of, okay, maybe these guys could bounce back. They're still in their, early 30s, late 20s, things like that. Maybe they still could have a little bit of potential left in them. They had a down year that they could get it going. With Ottavino, I don't feel like that's the case. I feel like he's kind of reached that point where everything going forward is just a steady decline. So I just thought that this was not the kind of move that Stearns would make. I was a bit surprised, but he's here again. So this is where we're at. And like I said, I just hope that this is not the last move for the bullpen, because you're really relying on Jorge Lopez to be an automatic bounce back handed if you want him to be a true difference maker. Because the other guys that are here, who knows, Michael Tonkin and Austin Adams and Phil Bickford and Drew Smith, who's still here. Like, I don't have much faith in those guys. So yes, we have Diaz come back from the injury. We still got Brooks Raley, but Other than that, I don't have too much confidence in a lot of these other relievers. And if we're going to be prioritizing bullpen over DH, which I think JD Martinez, these other guys we've talked about, Jorge Soler, those guys to me are much higher priorities. But if you're going to tell me you're going to go for Ottavino over one of those guys, I just strongly disagree.
I think since the beginning of this entire offseason, I think especially with the pitching, I have been able to say that I understand why Stearns brought this arm in, or why Stearns traded for this arm, or why Stearns signed this guy on a minor league deal, why he likes this guy. What are these little things that he likes? This one, I don't understand. I don't think it's just like the fact that Adam Ottavino is 38 years old. I think it also has the fact that he also I think that this has just run its course. Like, I think that at this point, they got their 1-year deal from him in 2022. He pitched well, and a 1-year deal for a reliever, you take it and leave it. That's like one of the main things that you need to do with bullpen free agency signings. You take it and leave it. Unless he has a Miles amount of upside, which he obviously doesn't, there wasn't a reason to bring him back. They brought him back. They basically escaped a jail sentence, basically, with him declining that option. I'm not fine with it being obviously the only move that they make. If this is the only bullpen move that they make at this current moment, aside from, Jorge Lopez or something, that is going to be a little bit concerning, because that means that you are relying a little bit too much on minor league depth, and you're relying a little too much on some of these arms that obviously they could be good, but they're going to need to bounce back. They needed to get a more established arm in here. I think that Ottavino is established, but the problem is that in that downswing of 30, we don't know what we're going to get from him. And I think that as compared to the highest capacity, the 100 percentile outcome that you got in 2022, compared to what he did in 2023, the command was gone, the control was gone. He was giving up so many runs in high leverage while you really, really needed him to, because you couldn't rely on anybody else with Edwin Diaz out. That bullpen was running on fumes. And I understand that maybe the pitching staff, most likely it will be better this year, because I don't think it can be worse. I don't think that this was the right move, and I don't think that this is going to be something that pays off the best as it did in 2022. Like, this is the same contract that he signed around there in 2022. Maybe there's a way that, he pitches out of it being a bargain, but, selfishly, I'm hoping that he's not as good as 2022, because I don't want them to bring him back the next year. So I understand he had some success. It was overall, in a vacuum, it was a solid year for Adam Ottavino. But for what they needed him to do, and they're probably going to have him do this year with all these uncertainties in the bullpen, I just don't think that this was the right move. And then we also had, like, 5-6 days ago, him on MLB Network talking about kind of how he wanted to renegotiate his whole salary and everything. And then he also talked about his uncertainty with the Mets front office and the direction that they were going in. And then less than a week later, he's back. Now, I understand he said he wanted to come back. Obviously, New York, he's from New York, whatever. But that was just very odd to me, where he kind of just screwed himself at a $7 million. And then he comes back for less money. And then you have the deferred, they still are giving him deferred payments now. And then he says that he doesn't know what's going on with the front office, and then he comes back. It was just a very odd situation. This whole entire road after that 2022 season, it just seemed so unnecessary, and it still seems so unnecessary, especially the fact that they just brought him back again for a third year in a row.
When you just look at baseball in general, it's hard to get a guy to just give you good year after good year after good year when it comes to the bullpen. It's like you said, when you get that one good year, you take it and leave it. Thank you for your service. Let's go get somebody else. That's kind of the way that you normally approach bullpen. So, like you said, I thought they really dodged a bullet when he declined his player option, because that's what I also really disliked about the deal they gave him last year, was the fact that he even had that player option for it. I was like, oh my gosh, how do you give this guy 2 years at his age? And once he declined it, I thought that was a big surprise. Okay, good. The Mets don't have to pay him. They could get somebody else. And yet they still have.
It's like $3 million less, but again, that's like pocket change. I just, it's so odd. And maybe there is a reality, and maybe it is the reality where, all these other relievers that they've been linked to, Stanek, Peralta, there's a possibility that maybe a few of them wanted a multi-year deal. Maybe a few of them wanted the closer role. Maybe they wanted that. And maybe Ottavino was the best that they could possibly get on a 1-year deal in that sort of $10 million range that they supposedly have left to spend. I just don't think that this was it. And I think that this might have a costly concern if you are using this guy in huge high leverage situations where he was really, really bad at last year. If he wasn't 38 years old, I think there would be less of a concern. Like if he was Jorge Lopez, who is just entering his 30s, this probably would be fine. Okay, perfect. We'll put him in there. If it works, it works. And if not, we'll just move on. For some reason, I just don't really see a single situation where he just bounces back to that 2022 form. I just don't see him being back end level effective this year, like next year. I just don't see that happening.
Well, I think the issue is that if Jorge Lopez does not bounce back, then Adam Ottavino is your setup man. I think that's the other tough part, is that if they don't add another guy, who else is going to be the 8th inning guy or the other high leverage reliever with Edwin Diaz? It's going to be Ottavino again. And, for them to take this approach, it worked before, it'll work again. It's not as simple as that. It can't just be like, Edwin Diaz is healthy this year, so now Adam Ottavino could go to his role from 2 years ago, so he's going to give us those results again. I just feel like that is not the right mindset to have when it comes to, like you said, a reliever at this age where there's just such a less likely possibility of a bounce.
I talked about this a lot. I'd say like probably throughout this entire offseason, I've talked about catching lightning in a bottle. That's the type of way that they need to look at it when it comes to bullpens or it comes to a starter or something like that, because of the player development that is still like going on with a lot of the pitching prospects. Some of them are not ready, bringing in these 1-year deals and things like that of guys who project well. Well, the thing is that I just don't see at any point Adam Ottavino really projecting well going into a 38-year-old season, not necessarily just because he was bad last year or we've just seen the worst of him and we've seen the very best and the very worst, and you're kind of walking a tightrope here, but also there's that factor of that pitch clock nearly destroyed him last year. Let's not forget, and not to mention, I'm pretty sure it's going to be 3 seconds faster this year. I don't see a situation where this ends up working in the favor of 2022. And that's really the only concern that I have with this move. If this is the only move that they make for the bullpen, that's very concerning. I'm fine with Adam Ottavino being here. It's just, I don't like the role that he's probably going to be called upon.
Yeah, I think Peralta is a really good fit, obviously being left-handed, being so much younger, great numbers against left-handed hitters. And Ottavino, he's been a guy who's been able to kind of pitch well to Ryan left when he is going well. But I think also with a guy like Ryan Stanek, here's another guy who's much younger, a higher profile velocity, done it in the postseason, done it with multiple teams. Like you said, they're just guys who are better fits. And I got to be honest with you, I don't see Wandy Peralta getting a multi-year deal. I really just don't see it. So, that's been my one, like, okay, well, if Stanek gets a multi-year deal, I understand why they went the Ottavino route. But I think if you have the choice between one of Ottavino or Peralta, to me, it's Peralta 10 times out of 10.
Peralta, I would definitely go after. Stanek, I go after. I don't understand the Mets fans' obsession with Phil Maton. I don't think he's like, the problem is that I think that he's a solid reliever. He's got some decent stuff. But the thing is that this bullpen needs velocity and he doesn't have it. So it's just like, I just don't think that that's the route to go with. Like, if you're looking for soft tossers, they have to be lefties in order to get that type of advantage to batters and be that sort of strikeout pitcher like Brooks Raley is. It's very confusing, this timeline with Ottavino, and I'm sure it's going to continue to be confusing as he continues to pitch, and maybe there is going to be a situation where he gets the high leverage jobs, still pitches like crap, and they still give all of these innings to him for absolutely no reason. But I don't know. I'm not really looking forward to seeing Adam Ottavino pitch for the Mets this year. We did see the best out of him. We probably saw the best year of his career in 2022, but I'm not taking a huge bet on it because I just see a huge lack of upside there, and I can see where this is going to get way, way worse. And I hope that if he does struggle, and if he is not effective and possibly even worse than 2023, I hope that there is a position where they cut the cord. I'm just hoping that they don't use track record as much as they did. And if he continues to struggle, if he's terrible in June, one of the worst relievers in all of baseball, I hope that they have the decency to just cut it loose on a one-year deal. So now earlier this week, MLB Pipeline released their top 100 prospects going into the 2024 season, and these included 4 of the following Mets prospects that were featured on this list. At number 97 is Ryan Clifford, 20-year-old first baseman slash outfielder who was one of the pieces acquired by the Mets from the Astros in exchange for Justin Verlander at the trade deadline. Clifford slugged 24 home runs in 511 plate appearances across 2 levels in the Astros and the Mets organization, expected to begin 2024 in High A Brooklyn. At number 66 is Luis Angel Acuna, 21-year-old infield prospect who was acquired by the Mets from the Rangers in exchange for Max Scherzer at the deadline. Acuna's plus tools were on full display all year last season, stealing a league-leading 57 bases and posting a 769 OPS in 569 plate appearances across the Mets and Rangers organization, and is expected to begin 2024 in AAA Syracuse. At number 53 is Drew Gilbert, 23-year-old outfielder who was the other piece acquired by the Mets from the Astros for Justin Verlander. After a sidelining injury at the beginning of 2023, Gilbert took off from there, posting a 868 OPS with 18 home runs in 434 plate appearances across 2 levels of the minor leagues, also expected to begin 2024 in AAA Syracuse. And at number 45, there's Jet Williams, 20-year-old infielder and former first-round pick by the Mets back in 2022, as Williams was an instant breakout prospect last year, excelling through 3 levels of the Mets minor league system, posting an 876 OPS across 534 plate appearances and swiping 45 bases. He is also expected to begin 2024 in AA Binghamton this season. Per MLB Pipeline, the Mets farm system ranks 4th overall in baseball after a massive jump post a historic overhaul at the 2023 MLB trade deadline.
I was pretty glad to see that they ranked Drew Gilbert over Luis Angel Acuna because, originally the thought was maybe that Acuna was the better prospect than Gilbert from some, not by everybody. But the fact that they decided to go with Gilbert, that's great. I think the main thing that stands out to me, though, is that 3 of those 4 names you listed are guys that they got at the trade deadline. So these are guys that, we were not talking about in the offseason of last year. The fact of trying to turn a negative into a positive with, the Verlander and Scherzer not working out, and then using that to create a top 5 farm system, I think is all things that, I'm really happy with. My only gripe, I guess I could say, is the similarities between Jet Williams and Luis Angel Acuna. The fact that they do have similar strengths, similar weaknesses, play a similar position. I think trying to find a fit for all of these guys is really going to be the toughest part of it. I mean, Clifford, he's our first baseman slash DH. Drew Gilbert, you can put him anywhere in the outfield. I'm not worried about him. But I think them trying to figure out, what is the actual future on the Mets with Williams and with Acuna, that's going to be the big question mark. When you have Lindor locked down for 10 years, Acuna and Jet are not going to move to third base. McNeil, who knows what's going to happen there, honestly. I mean, if they end up trading him at some point, he still has a few years left on his extension. Do you move him to the outfield? It's not really where he belongs. So I think just trying to find a spot for those 2 guys is ultimately going to be the big question mark. And if they pan out, that's the big thing, is that you're hoping that at least one, if not both of them, could develop some kind of power, because if not, they're going to be pretty limited as far as what they can provide you on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm glad that they have a few top 100 prospects. But I think that, trying to find a role for them is really going to be what it comes down to, because again, in this Steve Cohen regime, we have not really seen them move on from these top 10 prospects and things like that. They have not been doing many trades with these guys. It seems like they want to keep them and have them part of the future plan. So if that's the case, you got to find spots for them.
Currently, it just seems like it's just kind of keeping all the options open. I think that's what they're doing currently with these prospects. They have to see what they're going to do before they establish what they're going to do with them. And I think that that's what they're looking at. To be honest, I was expecting Jet Williams to get ranked a lot higher. So we all know how I'm not high on Jet Williams, but I think that 45, it's decent. I'm not really like, completely against it at all. It's kind of what I expected him to be, the highest ranked prospect from Pipeline, obviously. I think that Ryan Clifford was a little bit of a surprise, mainly because he kind of fell off a little bit towards the end of the year there. Power sells, in my opinion, so I'm all good with it. Luis Angel Acuna, I'd say, I just don't think that he's a top 100 prospect, personally. Like, I just don't. In the top 100, he obviously was, I believe, number one or number two for Texas, so he was going to get that type of recognition. Obviously, we saw Kevin Parada fall off of the top 100 from last year. It's a big proving ground for him. We talked about that last week. I was kind of surprised to not see Christian Scott there. I think that he had a fantastic year last year.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. Maybe towards the middle of the season. I don't know. Maybe he's just a little bit older than some of the. Obviously, I'm still high on Aram and Alex Ramirez, but he did not have a good year, so I understand why the uptick is not there as a top 100. But I believe Baseball America had him in their bottom 10% in their top 100. So it's a very boomer bust prospect. You can have a big opinion on him, or you can have a small opinion on him. Can't wait for spring training. I can't wait to see what these guys can do, to be honest. I mean, I think that you want to see what they can actually showcase against somewhat major league competition in less than a month. So I'm excited to see it. If you look at these prospects, and again, like you just said, 3 of them were acquired at the trade deadline. So if they weren't acquired at the trade deadline, the Mets probably would have only had 1 prospect on the top 100, which kind of tells you where the Mets farm system is still evaluated. It still needs some work. It still has some pieces that are good. It's still top heavy, and there still is a long, long way to go for where they get to that tier of the Dodgers, or even some cases the Rays or the Orioles now, of how they've developed their talent. So there still is a long way to go. But again, just like everything else this year, especially with the prospects, it's all a wait and see.
The one other interesting thing that stands out to me is that, Jet Williams is on there. He's a guy that was a first-round pick, but a guy like Colin Howard, who the Mets just took in the first round, he doesn't make it. So I do kind of wonder about that, because like we've said, we do have this high expectation when it comes to first-round picks. So I am kind of curious to see how he kind of, rises and falls. But other than that, to not see Ronnie, is it because of the injury? I suppose.
Maybe.
Vientos was a guy who was top 100 a couple years ago. Not the case anymore. Probably the same case with Brett. They probably consider him kind of graduated. So, you're going to have guys that kind of fall out of it, whether it's because they struggled or because they graduate, things like that. So it's something that is it's constantly moving from year to year.
Mauricio, I still would put on the top 100. Personally, I would, because he's still prospect eligible, but that, it just, I guess not. The injury, he's not going to be playing this year. Most likely won't play at all this year. As for Colin Howard, I don't think he's played that much. So they just want to see him play. The same goes for Brandon Sproat. I don't think has pitched yet in the minor leagues at all.
What I'm saying is that there still are plenty of guys who were taken in the first round this year who are on that list.
Yeah.
So for him to not make that list, I'm like, all right.
And the Mets got down to slot 32. So, I mean, there's a possibility that most of the first round picks, they will probably end up in the top 100 no matter what without that. But just with the first round pedigree alone, I don't know if we can technically count Houck as a first round pick. It's kind of like competitive balanced A, it's 32 overall. So it's kind of in that middle of an additional compensation type of pick. So I don't know, maybe there's a possibility where they just need to see him play more, mainly because he just doesn't have the biggest of draft stock compared to some of the guys who were drafted in the draft. But it was definitely an underslot pick, because I think he was expected to go 15th or 16th, and he dropped to 32. So then, I mean, we'll see, but I think that I kind of get it, because he just has not played that much. Same goes for Brandon Sproat. All of our big 4 guys already up here. The last generation it's pretty impressive, I would say, but mainly because they had to take on a lot of money for 3 of these guys, but it's in a better direction than it was last year. And that's basically what you have to look at now, with a lot more young talent coming in and just the team in general, the organization in general, just getting a lot younger.
My only other thing was at the time when the New York Mets got Luis Angel Acuna, as far as the names that were being rumored as potential guys that could be coming over to the Mets from Texas, there was a few nice options to pick from. So I think seeing Acuna be ranked over Sebastian Walcott, I thought that was pretty interesting because, I thought there were some other guys I would have felt were a little bit safer bets from Texas that actually had some power compared to Luis Angel Acuna. You're hoping he gets that power. So I think that's going to be interesting development as far as long-term. Did the Mets make the right choice from the Texas side as far as those, they weren't going to get the other top 10 prospects on the top 100 that are Rangers, but those other guys as far as how that kind of shakes out.
Yeah, Sebastian Walcott's also 17, so there's a little bit more of a wild card there, but there was a lot more upside as compared to Luis Angel Acuna, which I think we've really established what type of player he is, but we just haven't yet to see it at the major league level. So now I don't want to spend a lot of time on this topic because we most likely will end up just becoming broken records. But Mets second baseman Jeff McNeil went on MLB Network's Foul Territory and gave his opinion on Pete Alonso's future with the Mets. Explaining his side of former extension talks, McNeil stated that he knows Pete wants to be a Met, and we all know he wants to be a Met as well. I know he loves New York, so hopefully we can keep him long term. I don't want him to play anywhere else. I want to see him be my teammate for a long time. Prior to the 2023 season, McNeil signed a 4-year, $50 million extension with the Mets, buying out his last 2 years of arbitration. Alonso and McNeil have been teammates at the major league level since 2019, where both of them broke out that same season, both receiving their first All-Star selections. Alonso is set to become a free agent following the 2024 season, represented by baseball's high roller Scott Boras.
I do find this interesting, because I read online, and, whenever I read something online, it has to be true. I read that Pete Alonso wants to be a Cub. So I think this is definitely some big news.
I think he still does. I think he still does.
Yeah, exactly. So I think
he's a pathological liar, as I've been told.
Yeah, so he's toxic. I mean, we've heard just so many different things about Pete Alonso. So at this point, it's like, who do we believe? Do we believe the reporters online? Do we believe Jeff McNeil? Like I always say, actions speak louder than words. So it's a thing that it's going to be talked about this offseason. It's going to be talked about all season long. And we're not really going to know the answer until the decision is made next offseason. And even if Pete Alonso wants to be a Met, if the Mets don't offer him what he's looking for, then he may go elsewhere. The example I give, Freddie Freeman. Freeman obviously wanted to be a Brave. The Braves did not meet his asking price. The Dodgers did. So money talks. So you could want to be somewhere, but if they don't give what you believe you're worth, it doesn't really mean anything. You kind of have to decide, what are your priorities? Is it money or is it where I want to play? And again, if everyone's going to be saying something different, you're going to have all this outside noise, and people are going to be asking Jeff McNeil. They're going to be asking David Stearns. Everyone's going to be, reporters always going to be asking. They're going to be asking Pete. Everyone wants to know what the deal is. Where's he going to go? Is he going to stay? That's why I wish that they had just gotten this done a while ago when Steve Cohen first came in. It could have avoided a lot of headaches, saved you some money, saved you some drama. But, they decided to play the long game. Scott Boras is going to free agency. I mean, we know the drill. I feel like this one has gotten a lot more attention than the Brandon Nimmo scenario, even though he was represented by Scott Boras. I think that since Pete is, whatever you want to call it, more well-known, more expressive as far as what he does on the field, what he does off the field with the things that he says, and his poop sandwich quotes and things like that being mic'd up and what have you. So it becomes a bigger storyline, even though they're represented by the same agent.
Jeff McNeil, I'd say that, out of all of like his teammates, all jokes aside, I'd say that he is probably like the closest with Pete Alonso. They have been for a long time. They came up through the system together. It's almost been a guarantee, but I think that it's been pretty much confirmed here with what McNeil said, is that, we know that Pete likes being a Met. We know that he wants to be here. I think that Pete Alonso, as compared to like other stars that the Mets had, like Jacob deGrom, he's a lot more of a straightforward guy. He's going to give you a straightforward answer, maybe a little straightforward, a little too much. He's not going to sugarcoat it for you. I think that side has always been something that has really just been almost a near guarantee with Pete Alonso ever since he came up here. Obviously, it all just has to do with how this market perceives him, how it is going to affect the Mets in that standpoint of will they match what another team will match, because there is going to be a team out there flex out a big amount of money that he is nowhere near worth on this market. San Francisco, it's a possibility. I mean, they've lost out on a lot of free agents playing the Boris market. I don't think that it's going to do as much with team preference as compared to other guys who are willing to take that discount and stay here. I just want to see progress being made. It's going to be one of these things that is going to be talked about all year. I think that it's already established. I feel like the first question he's going to be asked in spring training is about the extension. I think that we already know that's going to happen. Again, they go to spring training. I said this before. I don't want to see a situation where they go to spring training and we hear that they have not discussed absolutely anything. Because again, if they're not as interested in a DH per se, if they're not interested in that, kind of makes where you're like, okay, well, let's talk to the closest thing we have to a DH right now and try to get something like this done. I understand they're looking at the bullpen scenario right now, but I just want to see some progress being made on an extension for the Mets and Pete Alonso. I don't think it's going to get done. I think that if it does get done, it's going to come out of a complete surprise out of left field. All parties are willing to participate in this whole situation. I'm not worried about it, but I'm just kind of hoping that the process just runs smooth. Like, that's what I'm hoping, what I'm expecting, that they do have these discussions, because the latest from what we have heard, the Mets have not discussed anything with Pete Alonso yet. So I'd like to see some progress being made in this next month, or then we're going to start to have a little bit of a worry. Then it's going to start to dwindle into the season, and it's going to become a distraction all year, which I don't want to see that happen. It's kind of odd to see like Jeff McNeil just like publicly talk about other players talking about other players and their contract situation. It's just very weird. Like, I just feel like it just comes out of like something you can resource back to if it does not go in the way that you thought it would. Again, like I said, I don't want to become a broken record. We want to keep Pete Alonso here for a long time. They got to do it. I mean, he's very important to this team. Can say it, until we're red in the face. As for the big bats, with the possibilities of the Mets adding a DH kind of dwindling at this current moment, Ken Rosenthal of The Athletic reported about the most likely possibilities at the position going into 2024. Rosenthal stated that the Mets do not seem inclined to spend on a DH, as they are preferring to create opportunities for internal options such as Mark Vientos. But as for another consideration, Rosenthal added that the Mets could consider installing Starling Marte to DH, noting that Marte is entering a 35-year-old season, playing just 108 games and battling multiple injuries, and it might command the Mets to give him some at-bats at the position. Starling Marte really struggled last season in just 86 games, posting a .625 OPS across 341 plate appearances. Marte will be owed a guaranteed $19.5 million a year through 2025 after signing a 4-year, $78 million contract with the Mets 2 off seasons ago.
I still don't think that him being the DH solves the DH problem, because it's more than just a DH problem. It's, do you have 9 hitters in your lineup that you feel good about? Which the Mets do not. We've had this discussion a few times now, and I don't think that's like, oh, well, you know what? We don't need to get a DH because we could just make Marte the DH. That's not going to solve anything, because then who's going to be in right field? I mean, are you just going to have DJ Stewart be out there full time? Because if you have Marte be your right fielder and DJ Stewart your DH, well, still, is DJ Stewart that good to be in your lineup every day? I mean, do we believe in the one good month he had, followed up by a bad month? And to go one step further, how about his career not being that great before this year? So it's just, no matter what, you still have the same problem. I mean, you could try to, it reminds me of something where it's like you're trying to plug a leak one spot, but then that means it's going to make another leak somewhere else. So no matter what, you're going to have this dilemma in the lineup of, okay, well, who is going to bat, like we said, who's going to bat behind Pete Alonso? Who's going to bat 7th and 5th and all this other? Who's going to bat 2nd? Like we always have discussions, because it's like, okay, well, you know what? I could just move Alvarez from the bottom of the line and put him at the top of the line. Wow, but then it's like, oh, but now my bottom of the line isn't good. So it just feels that, you know what? That's why I've been of the approach that they need to look external with this for DH, because I think that no matter how they shuffle who they have, their lineup still is not going to be all that great, especially that bottom half of it, because you still have too many question marks, and that includes Starling Marte. Not only do you have the question mark of his performance, because even before Marte did go down with the injury, he wasn't playing well. So that's the other big thing. So it's like, number one, can he be on the field? But number two, when he is on the field, can he actually be productive? So you have to worry about those two things. Obviously, we have our concerns about Brett Beatty. Can he get it done the major league level? Yet to see it so far, 0 for 2. Harrison Bader, I think is no good. He's been a below average hitter. I don't see how that changes. And then Jeff McNeil, is he good year, bad year, good year, bad year? I mean, so no matter what, you have all these question marks. And, Mark Vientos, is he a major league piece? DJ Stewart, is he a consistent piece? You don't know, because they don't have the proven track records right now. So that's why I feel like you take a guy like a JD Martinez, perennial all-star. Every year's a good year. He had a better year this year than the year before. Like, he gives big time power. Like, fits everything you call on this life. Hits left-handed pitching. Same with Soler, prolific power hitter. These guys are perfect fits. They solve your problems. Not let's move Marte here and move McNeil over there and then bring DJ Stewart and then Vientos. Like, all these guys that you have here, just they're not good enough. And I think that what would make me the most frustrated is they don't add a DH, and then their lineup is not good. Mark Vientos, he doesn't get the job done. DJ Stewart goes back to being DJ Stewart, and they have to make a trade at the deadline. They have to give up a pretty good young piece. We're not talking about our top 100 guys, but you give up a pretty good piece that we like. Take your pick, maybe one of the pitchers like a Hamill or Vassell, whoever it is. You know what I mean? Like a piece that we like a little bit. And you have to give that up to get a DH that was available in the offseason that you could have just signed. And we've seen them do that before. And I just think it'd be very frustrating to see that be repeated.
Again, I'm not as frustrated as everybody else is with like them adding a big bat or adding a this or adding that. If they want to give the playing time to Mark Vientos, again, like I've said, they didn't give him any playing time last year or sufficient enough playing time. If they give him actual playing time and give him actual reps, consistent reps, and don't bench him after he gets a 2-hit game, then I'm fine with it. Go ahead. Give it to him. Let him do it all the way to the All-Star break. Let him do it all the way to the trade deadline. I'm fine with it. We'll see what he does. Prove yourself. Fine. If this is your wait and see year, this is your transition year, fine. Do it. But the thing about Starling Marte at DH, I personally don't care how banged up Marte is. I really don't. I really don't. It's either he plays right field or nothing. For me, this whole situation of McNeil can bat fifth, Marte can DH, that type of crap is why this lineup is always inferior to other lineups, and they never get the job done at a consistent rate. You got to stop putting your worst power bats in a power dominant position. Currently, you're looking at a lineup where they're sandwiched in, like I've said multiple times before, the DH they need, and the DH needs to bat fifth, with the bottom of the lineup just being so power deprived. Like I've said before, again, Starling Marte is a non-factor to me. He still is a non-factor. I don't care how he performed in the Dominican Winter League. He still is a non-factor to me, with the injuries, the contract, everything that's gone on with him and the trajectory he is on. He is a non-factor to me. At his current condition of how we're feeling about him, I personally believe the Mets lineup is better without him in it. I feel like if he were to give you actual good DH value, he most likely would have to be better than his 2022 self, which I don't believe he can be. I don't even know if he can be better than his 2023 self, to be honest. We have not seen that yet. So why would I put a non-factor that I've pretty much established because of all of these things that have gone on in this last year or two with Starling Marte? Why would I put a non-factor in the most power-hungry and most weak position that the Mets have had in 5 freaking years, in the last 3 years and 4 years, ever since the DH was implemented? They have had this problem. Why would I put the biggest non-factor at DH? If I ever see a single game where Marte is DHing, that is just a punt lineup. A guy who is somebody you just want to keep healthy just to put him into the lineup. Because again, like I said, I think that the Mets lineup right now objectively is better without him in it right now, because of how just scared I am of how he is going to produce, how he's going to stay healthy, or anything going into a 35-year-old season. I just don't think that we're in that position at all, where like how the Yankees did in the final years of Jeter's career, where he had Cano and Teixeira and all of these power bats behind him, where you literally could have just DH Jeter at the top of the lineup as your leadoff hitter. That's not the case right now. I just don't see the reason as to even thinking about putting Starling Marte at DH. I would much rather put possibly even Brett Beatty at DH over Starling Marte. That's literally how I feel about Marte. That's the confidence level that I have in him. I'm tired of the Mets putting non-power hitters in power-needed positions. And this would just continue to show that they've learned nothing. And I'm hoping that this is not even in the mindset of Stearns whatsoever. And Marte is at the bottom of the lineup. I hope he doesn't bat second. But again, I think that when you look at it right now, there's no reason to put Marte on the DH depth chart at all with how we feel about him in this current position. It's either he is healthy to play right field or he isn't. Marte is not good enough to be a DH that's batting fifth. He's not good enough to be a DH. And to be honest, at some points, I wonder if he's even good enough to be our starting right fielder. So I am not going to put a non-factor in the biggest weakness that the Mets have had for the last 3, 4, 5 years.
I think the other frustrating aspect is that it's been going on, like you said, since the DH's been implemented. Like, you have an opportunity to fix it every year, and they're still yet to even attempt it in the offseason, any offseason, which I think is also very
fine with them sticking with internal option personally. Like, I'm okay with them giving a majority of the playing time to Mark Vientos. Do that. But like what they have done the past few years where, you know, we're going to have Vogelbach DH a little bit, and then we're going to have Darren Ruff DH a little bit, and then we're going to have Dom Smith DH a little bit, and JD Davis and all these pieces. They never gave a definitive answer as to who the DH on the team was. And that was affecting the playing time of everybody, and they couldn't have that consistent reps whatsoever. I'm not saying bring back Dominic Smith so he can get consistent reps, but what I'm saying is if they are going to give it to Vientos, give it to Vientos. It can't just be this guy is the better batting average after the guy that bats fourth, so he bats fifth, and he's got the seniority here, such as, you know, Jeff McNeil or Starling Marte, or, you know, like, I don't want to see a situation where we continue to rotate out these 5-hole hitters. Like, just give me somebody consistently. If you're going to bat DJ Stewart fifth, bat DJ Stewart fifth. If you are going to bat Mark Vientos fifth, bat Mark Vientos fifth. I'm just so tired of the lack of consistency. And then we've also had the lack of production from this position. It's just that it's enough. It's enough already. They have to finally find something. Do I think Mark Vientos could do that? Maybe, but he's not really an established power bat. Again, I still would get that bat. But if they're going to give it to Mark Vientos, give it to Mark Vientos and stay there. If he struggles, DJ Stewart, whatever. But there needs to be actual consistency. I'm so tired of it just being floated up in the air. Whatever they go with, because of how it's a wait and see year. But whatever they go with this position, they have to stick to it, because the inconsistency is just so aggravating because of how many times they have just screwed this up over and over and over again, not getting protection for Alonso, and then kind of just squandering around of it during the year. It's an annoying pattern that needs to stop. So now with the direction that the Mets starting rotation is going and the trend of how David Stearns has ran teams in Milwaukee, a 6-man rotation is very likely for the Mets in 2024. The Mets' current top 5, the starting rotation, right now stands with Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, Jose Quintana, Luis Severino, and Adrian Hauser, which opens up the Mets' internal depth as 6th arm candidates. First, there is left-handed pitcher Joey Lucchesi, who had a solid return from Tommy John surgery last season, posting a 2.89 earned run average, 4.22 fielding independent pitching, striking out 16.4% of batters across 46.2 innings pitched. Lucchesi is now 31 years old and is under team control through 2025. Then there is right-handed pitcher Jose Budo, a graduated Mets prospect who, just like Lucchesi, was very solid last season in a smaller sample, posting a 3.64 earned run average, a 4.02 fielding independent pitching, striking out 21.9% 7.2% of batters across 42 innings pitched. Budo is now 26 years old and pitched a career-high 133 innings combined between the major league level and AAA Syracuse. And finally, there's right-handed pitcher Tylor Megill, who was very inconsistent throughout 25 starts last year, posting a 4.70 earned run average, a 4.96 fielding independent pitching, striking out just 18.5% of batters across 126.1 innings pitched. Megill will enter a 28-year-old season and will get an extended look in spring training as well as the other candidates. Other names in this conversation include David Peterson, who is expected to miss the first few months recovering from hip surgery, as well as Max Kranick, a 26-year-old right-handed pitcher who was claimed off of waivers by the Mets from Pittsburgh a few weeks ago and can start. Minor league prospects who could be considered with a strong spring campaign include Mike Vassell, Christian Scott, and Justin Jarvis, who was acquired by the Mets from Milwaukee at the trade deadline in exchange for outfielder Mark Canha.
When it comes to the New York Mets rotation, in all likelihood, it definitely can be a six-man rotation based off of the trends that David Stearns has done. When it comes to that six-man, I feel like right now Tylor Megill is the guy that has the edge. I think that Jose Budo, he's gotten his opportunities. Haven't seen anything too impressive. I mean, don't forget that when Tylor Megill first came up, he was pitching really good, and then he had the injuries, and then he had the inconsistencies. But at least we've seen him actually be effective on the major league level. I like what I saw from Joey Lucchesi this past season. I thought he got really an unfair chance. I thought that with the way this rotation performed, how bad it was, you get rid of guys like Verlander and Scherzer. I think that Joey Lucchesi should have got more starts than he did. But I think that ultimately this is going to be one of those spring training battles, perhaps, where we were talking about earlier on with the prospects, but it'll make the decision for them much easier if someone has a very good spring training or if someone has a really bad spring training. Like if Joey Lucchesi gets bombed, it's like, okay, well, he's probably not the leading candidate to be in the sixth-man spot. But if you see one of these prospects step up and have a good spring, or Tylor Megill has a good spring, then going into it, you're like, okay, that's probably going to be our sixth starter. And then it could be adjusted as things go on. If all of a sudden someone's pitching really well in the minor league system, and then you have an injury or someone isn't pitching well, then you can kind of make that switch. But one of the other things that I would be looking at is the fact that, before the Mets had signed Sean Manaea, there was this rumor that maybe they're interested in a Hyun-Jin Ryu. Or I think even Mike Clevenger was another name that they were also linked to. I could also see them maybe taking that approach because it's kind of similar to what we said with the DH position, where if those guys weren't there for you last year as, okay, they could be in a starting role per se, in this case with a starting pitcher being there every 5 days or every 6 days in a six-man rotation, I don't see how they are this year. I mean, that's the other thing that I kind of worry about is that if you felt that, okay, we need to sign Severino, we need to sign Manaea and trade for Hauser because we don't have enough confidence in our other internal options, I don't understand why all of a sudden you would still have them in the rotation by making it a six-man rotation. So I think that unless a prospect steps up, like some of those guys that you listed, I mean, whether it be Jarvis or some of the other young pieces, unless one of those guys comes over and really kind of takes it by storm, I could see them as maybe adding one other veteran piece on a one-year deal or even like a minor league contract, things like that, and see if maybe they could battle it out. Because I think Megill, right now, he's probably the leading candidate. But I think that if he gets hurt again or struggles or what have you, then all of a sudden it gets a lot tougher as far as who is going to be that sixth guy. Because right now there's no hands down, no doubt about it. Like, that's our guy.
Still don't know if there is going to be a six-man rotation, but again, like at this current trend, quite a few pieces who have really struggled to stay healthy or, struggled to get length out of. So you get that extra day and that extra rest. Everybody can throw at max effort with an extra day of rest. Now, obviously, I mean, I have the soft spot for Tylor Megill. I have because I think that at his best, he could be a really good pitcher. There just has to be a way where they find that type of consistency with him if he is going to be a starter or he's going to be a reliever. And I think that overall, the sixth starter kind of has to be someone who can give you length out of the bullpen, maybe 4 or 5 innings as a start. Multiple inning opener, shall we say, where you don't really tax the bullpen as much in the first 5 days with the actual rotation, with everybody on short rest so they can go farther innings. And then you kind of have this sixth arm who could come out of the bullpen if the other starter needs help, or they can give you some innings to start off, being kind of like an opener. In terms of the style of pitcher, like innings eater, I think that Jose Butto is probably the best bet for that. But then there's also Joey Lucchesi, who also can give you multiple innings. I don't really trust that he's going to be as good as he was last year. It was a small sample. I just don't think that he's going to continue to repeat that. Tyler McGill, it seems like, and I saw this report from the Post yesterday, looked like he developed some kind of split-fingered fastball or something. Apparently, it's being classified on the Mets analytics team as an elite pitch. So, you know what? Maybe there's a possibility where he develops this pitch, he starts throwing a little bit harder, gets the extra day of rest, and maybe he is the sixth guy in the rotation. We already know my concerns about David Peterson, but he's currently a non-factor given his missing a surgery. It looks like since this has been a problem for him for a while, he'll probably rehab for a little bit. And, maybe he comes back, after the All-Star break or something like that. We'll see him maybe come into the mix eventually. And then, of course, maybe you do get a strong Mike Vassell, and you get a strong performance from Christian Scott. You get a strong performance from Justin Jarvis. I mean, I'm not really expecting this Max Kranick guy to do much, but he is an option who can give you some innings. I mean, I don't know. If you can get a strong campaign in spring from Jose Butto, Joey Lucchesi, Tyler McGill, Max Kranick, Mike Vassell, Christian Scott, Justin Jarvis, any of those 7 arms, which by probability, you will get a good performance from one of them. That would be guaranteed of these guys to be at the top of the food chain. Hopefully, it is one of the major league ready pieces where you can give a little bit more time to some of your prospects in the minor leagues before they come up. I'm hoping that we do get a breakout starter-ish performance in spring. Like, that's what I'm hoping to see. And listen, I think that we're going to be talking about this a lot throughout spring training, of who's in the lead, of who's how everyone is doing, what we like from this guy, what we dislike from this guy. Should this guy start in AAA? Should this guy start in the majors? But I think that having that extra arm, again, for that insurance, just to keep the rest of the rotation healthy, is going to be extremely important. And we'll see where that consistency lands with these sixth arm candidates.
I think the only thing that I would be monitoring is that, you talk about trying to have the bullpen kind of rested those 5 days, and then the sixth guy, it could be more like opener type. My only concern is that based off of the kind of starts that Sean Manaea had this past season, where he wasn't working too deep into games, and, the injury history of Luis Severino, things like that, I don't know if the Mets have the current rotation where they have those 5 guys who are not going to tax the bullpen. I think that they already might have 1 or 2 guys already in there that kind of do that already. So then to add a 6th guy also doing that, you also wonder how that impacts the bullpen, especially if, like we said earlier, Ottavino is the only other addition that they make. They still don't really have that other swingman in the bullpen that kind of gives you those multiple innings as that nice middle relief pitcher that can kind of bridge the gap to the high leverage guys of the Brooks Raley, maybe Jorge Lopez, and definitely Edwin Diaz.
Yeah, I mean, there is some open spots in this bullpen right now. And as you look at it, maybe they do choose a 6th arm for the rotation, and also they add another guy who can start. So maybe you have 2 options that can kind of clean up innings if you have a blow-up start from Manaea, or you have a blow-up start from Luis Severino, or have a blow-up start from Adrian Hauser, who, on a good day is giving you 2 to 3 run ball through 5 innings. So there is a lot of options. And I think, again, just for everything, they're keeping those options open for like a pool of pieces that they've seen the best of and they have seen the worst of, and hopefully they can kind of just narrow it down to that sort of median of who's going to start off in AAA and who's going to start off in the major leagues. And I really think, again, a 6-man rotation would really benefit the Mets, especially with the type of arms that they have brought into this rotation. And hopefully they just have one of these 7 or 8 arms that could possibly be that 6-man. Hopefully they just see one of them stick in spring training, and odds are 1 of 8 do well, maybe 2 of 8 do well, or 3 of 8 do well. Hopefully they can have reliable enough options of where they can give you bunches of innings out of the bullpen or from the rotation just to keep everybody else in the rotation healthy. The questions that you guys sent to us. Now, for those of you who don't know already, if you want to ask us a question, make sure to click the link in the description, fill out our form with your name, your Mets-related question, and it could be featured on the next episode of the Mets Weekly Podcast. This one is from Peter. Speaking of some prospects that we were talking about earlier, who do you think plays a better center field, Drew Gilbert or Jet Williams? Now, Drew Gilbert is an outfield prospect. Jet Williams is more of an infield prospect. Both of them are at that same kind of height range, same frame-ish. Drew Gilbert's 5'9". Jet Williams, I think, is 5'7", 5'8".
Right now, you have to give the advantage to Drew Gilbert. I think that, it's one thing that, okay, they have a similar frame, but Jet Williams is fast, things like that. But there is also just that familiarity with the position and just the overall reps there. It's not always as simple as transition as people think, like, oh, this guy's just going to move from the infield to the outfield. It doesn't work that smoothly for everybody. Like everyone has those learning curves. Fernando Tatis, it didn't go as well as it has now when they first did it, but now he's getting accustomed to it. He's in the corner. Jazz Chisholm, he had to move from second base to the outfield. So it does happen, and it's not always a seamless transition. So I think that right now Gilbert has the advantage. I think that from what we've seen, Drew Gilbert does look like a quality defensive center fielder, and is a guy who defensively can play center field for you right now. He has that going for him. It's just a matter of, okay, once that offense is consistent, he's pretty much ready to go. I think with Jet, first of all, you'd have to learn the position, and then you kind of see where it goes from there. So I think right now, I say Drew Gilbert is the safer bet. He's right now the better center fielder. If Jet could transition and then all of a sudden does it well, then maybe there's more of a conversation. Jet Williams does become the better center fielder, but I think right now it's got to be Drew Gilbert.
It's actually kind of weird because I've been told many times that Jet Williams is a great center fielder and he's got great center field defense. He's got fantastic range. To be honest, like at their best of what I prefer, I don't want either of them playing center field in the major leagues personally. Like I personally like Drew Gilbert a little bit more as a right fielder, and that's just me. I just think that like the arm, like his arm is just strong enough to profile there. The average center fielder, left fielder, like it's like 6 foot, 6'1", and like it's kind of just pushing the envelope a little bit. So like the lack of experience is something that's going to be a more of a learning curve, I'd say, for somebody like Jet Williams, who most likely will be playing second base for a majority of his career if he is up here in the major leagues. Also, it's kind of a little bit more forcing me of the uncertainty with Marte. Like if he were to come up here, he most likely will be playing right field. Or maybe there's a possibility where Harrison Bader gets hurt or plays like shit and he plays center field. But it's like at their very best, I don't like either of them in center field defensively. Same thing goes with Luis Angel Acuna. Like, I don't want to see him in the outfield personally. Like, I understand having a guy who's fast in the outfield, covering a lot of range in center field, but it's like the frame is a little too small. I just don't think the overall defensive prowess for both of them is good enough for center field, especially with how many reps center field gets these days compared to how it was like 10 years ago. It's not like Brandon Nimmo where he can kind of grow into being a center fielder. Height does limit a lot. And I know that a lot of people don't like when I go after the guy's height when they're strong and mighty, but it does factor into a lot of different tools and a lot of different limits of what they have at the major league level. But I would give it to Drew Gilbert because he actually is the primary outfielder. But I personally like Drew Gilbert in the corner. And Jet Williams, the best position that he plays is probably second base and shortstop.
In Jet, it looks like, he's played primarily shortstop. He may get like a couple, maybe like 24 games in center field or so. Like it's a majority. He's playing shortstop. It's like 90 games at short and 20 games in center field, something like that. So he's been playing some center field, but primarily he's been a shortstop. So it's like it's kind of going that back and forth. Like, is the infielder, is the outfielder? Even for him, just to be able to get the rhythm, it's constantly changing from time to time. So that's why, like, at least Gilbert, even if it's right field, center field, it's still the outfield day in, day out. Since he throws left-handed, he doesn't have a choice. But for someone like Jet Williams, he kind of has that flexibility. And like you said, you got to think he gets some reps at second base too, because he's not going to be playing shortstop here. So it's like, okay, well, he plays short and he plays second and then he plays second. But I mean, so then like that's another position he has to learn. So that's why I think it overall just be easier for Drew Gilbert.
Yeah, the positional flexibility, we all know how important that is to a guy like David Stearns. So you're going to see definitely a variety of different combinations with a lot of these prospects, and you're going to definitely see what they can do to full capacity in the minor leagues before they get that established role in the majors if they pan out well. So here are your rapid fire stories for this week. Key spring training dates have been announced for the 2024 New York Mets. Pitchers and catchers will report on February 14th. The first full team workout will be on February 19th, and the Mets will open Grapefruit League play February 24th against the Cardinals at Clover Park in Port St. Lucie, Florida. The Rockies have signed right-handed pitcher John Curtis to a minor league contract. Curtis was a part of the Mets organization for the last 2 years and pitched just 19.2 innings at the major league level in 2023 after returning from Tommy John surgery. The Rangers have signed right-handed pitcher David Robertson to a 1-year, $11 million contract. Robertson was with the Mets in 2023 before being traded to the Marlins at the deadline in exchange for minor league prospects Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez. The Dodgers have signed left-handed pitcher TJ McFarland to a minor league contract. McFarland spent 2023 in the Mets organization and pitched just 1 2/3 innings at the major league level. The Guardians have signed right-handed pitcher Carlos Carrasco to a minor league contract. Carrasco now returns to where he began his major league career, as well as the club that traded him to the Mets along with star shortstop Francisco Lindor back in 2021. The Mets contract agreement with international infield prospect Raimel Ortiz has fallen through due to age falsification. Ortiz was the 26th overall ranked prospect in the 2024 international pool. Mets all-time third baseman David Wright will remain on the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot for 2025. Wright received 6.2% of the writers' vote as the member of the 2024 candidate class. Former Mets pitcher Colin McHugh has retired after an 11-year MLB career. McHugh also pitched for the Astros, Braves, Rays, and Rockies, and was an 18th round pick by the Mets back in 2008. Parting words for episode 39. Edwin Diaz, the only one that matters. Hopefully we'll get to see him back on the field real soon, which I'm very excited for.
I would like to see a DH, honestly. I would feel a lot better about the overall team if they at least just had one more proven bat. Again, I would really prioritize that over another reliever. But if they are going to get a bullpen guy, like we said, Monty Peralta or Ryan Stanek are the two guys that stand out. Anyone else, it's just another one of these hope that they bounce back or hope that you find something you like. Again, I would like to at least see them just get whoever they get, just someone who had a good year last year. You know what I mean? Someone that could just build off of success. And too many, guys that had down years, reclamation projects, like all this other stuff. I just think it's just too many. You could do one or two, but you could do a few. But when it's everybody, I just feel that that's a risky approach to taking an offseason when it's for every player you sign.
I would just say let's just get this offseason moving. Like, there's still a lot of pieces out there. And I think that we're about less than a month away from spring training. So it looks like a lot of the dominoes should be able to fall in this last month, but we'll see what happens. And hopefully a few of them come over to the Mets and they upgrade the roster a little bit, because there are still some pieces on here that I would like to let go of that are, keeping the spot warm. On the 40-man roster, I don't want to see them on opening day. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, listening. We'll see you guys for episode 40 next week. Let's go Mets. Peace out.